A 6-year-old girl was stolen on her way to school, and to this day, she has never been found. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Kathy Shea. Viewer discretion is advised. Kathleen Shea was born on February 2nd, 1959, and she was one of 3 children. She was the oldest child, and she had 2 younger brothers. The family lived in a house on 14th Street in Tyrone, Pennsylvania. Her dad worked at a nearby factory, and her mom was a stay-at-home mom. Kathy was described as a really happy-go-lucky kid, very full of energy. And at the time of this case, she's only 6 years old, and she is a kindergartner at nearby Adams Elementary, which was just a couple of blocks away from her home. This story takes place in 1965, and kind of similar to a case I covered recently about the Beaumont children, this was a very, very different time where parents would let their kids walk to school, despite their age. Kids would walk to school on their own or partnered with, another student or a friend. After school, kids would basically go inside the house, throw the backpack inside, and then go right back outside and start playing. And they didn't tell their parents what they were doing. Parents just knew, they're outside playing. And when the whistle blew at the nearby factory for it, at the end of the workday, that's when kids knew, okay, time to go back inside. It's dinner time. Again, this is an environment where parents were a lot more trusting, and especially of their neighbors and of their children's friends and families. It was just a time before everyone knew to be extra cautious and paranoid. And fortunately, it takes stories like this that happened in the 50s, 60s, even the 70s to create this kind of environment of, well, now we're never letting our kids out, or have our eyes on our kids at all times and all that. So again, this is a significantly different time. A few weeks before this case happened, Kathy Shea had her tonsils removed, and so she was out of school for, I think, a couple of weeks or so. And by the time she was finally, cleared to go back to school, she was really, really, really excited. And because she was in the hospital on her birthday, getting her tonsils, taken care of, she missed having a birthday party. And so they planned a sleepover that would have occurred about a month or so later. And that was supposed to happen on Friday, March 19th, 1965. But that sleepover would never happen. It was March 18th, 1965, and it was about early afternoon or so. Apparently, the kindergarten classes that Kathy was in didn't start until the afternoon, which I guess was pretty normal practice back then. And so Kathy was at home that morning, and her mom, made lunch for the kids. They had lunch, and then Kathy was getting ready to go to school, and she was going to be walking to school on her own or with a friend. As Kathy is leaving the house, prepared to walk to school, her dad drives up into the driveway because it's his lunch break, and he says, "Hey, do you want me to drive you to school? It'll be a lot quicker." And Kathy said, "No, I want to walk," because she loved walking. She loved walking to school. And again, parents were like, "Okay, that's fine." So Kathy put on, her outfit for the day: red tights, a brown jumper, a beige coat with a fur collar. She had on a little brown hat, red gloves, and these yellow rubber rain boots. That day, she was supposed to basically meet up with, I guess, her cousin or a friend of hers, and they were going to walk to school. But that day, that other person, I guess, decided to take a different path to school. So she wasn't walking with Kathy. So Kathy was walking to school alone that day. It was literally a quick 3-block walk. She had just done the same walk the day before. She had done it, all school year long with no issues. And when Kathy walked out the door of her home to do this walk, her mom didn't realize that was the last time she would ever see her again. At about 5 p.m., Kathy had not arrived home from school, and her mom was becoming concerned that, she wasn't there. She assumed that Kathy probably just stayed a little bit later after school, because sometimes she did that. Now, earlier that afternoon when school started, Kathy's teacher noticed that Kathy wasn't actually in class. And back in 1965, it was not common practice for teachers or schools to call the parents to say, hey, your kid isn't here in school, where are they? It was not a normal thing that, nowadays, if your kid doesn't show up to school, you get a phone call, from what I understand. Her teacher, at the end of the school day, that's when they would call Kathy's parents to say, hey, I just wanted to check up on Kathy. I'm assuming she's still sick from her tonsils, and maybe that's why she didn't show up today. And her mom's like, wait a minute, she didn't show up to school today? And the teacher's like, no. And now her mom is in panic mode because she already realized she wasn't home yet. And so she calls the friend's house that she usually would walk to school with, or the cousin's house, and they said, Kathy isn't here, and she didn't walk with me today because I went a different way today, and I hadn't seen her. So, her mom gets in the car. She drives straight to the school, and her and the teacher, they basically go classroom to classroom. They look under every desk. They look in every closet. They look everywhere. Everywhere you could possibly think. And Kathy is nowhere to be found. And so she calls police to say, my daughter is missing. She's 6 years old. She's missing. This was before Amber Alerts. This was before, Code Adams and all of that, these things that we would use as to put out to everyone. This is before cell phones and pagers. And so they had to rely literally on word of mouth. And when they finally got this information to the news, and the news reported it, and then the newspapers had reported it within a day or so, no witnesses came forward to state they actually saw what happened to Kathy. And because the police immediately realized that this was like a foul play scenario. This was not a scenario where a 6-year-old girl just suddenly ran away from home, or she took the wrong path and she fell down somewhere and got hurt and nobody found her and she died. It wasn't one of those scenarios. There really wasn't any rough terrain for that to even happen. They knew that Kathy, more than likely, was stolen. She was abducted. She was kidnapped, that afternoon. But nobody saw it happen. Nobody heard anything happen, as far as they knew. Literally on that same night that she disappeared, Tyrone, Pennsylvania had the largest search party in their history. And the entire community went out, the police force went out, and they went through everything they could. They looked under every bush, under every tree. They knocked on every door. They looked, as many people that would let them search their homes. They would search every square inch of these houses. They left no stone unturned looking for this 6-year-old girl. And they found absolutely nothing. They did not find her. They did not find her backpack or any clothing items. They didn't find anything. She just poofed into thin air. This little town, because of a huge city or anything, this really sent a shockwave throughout the entire community, and almost immediately parents changed their approach, saying, all right, you're not to school alone, we're driving you, or you're not, we're going to be watching hawk every time you're outside playing, you're not going to leave the eyesight of this house. They immediately became, obviously and understandably, more paranoid. But once she wasn't found, and pretty much once, like I said, they realized that this was actually an abduction, the FBI was called, and so they came to assist in this investigation. The FBI and police were going basically to every single house that would have been along the walk that Kathy took, and they interviewed every single person. And then they interviewed people on the surrounding streets of that street. And so based on every interview they did, they realized that Kathy was literally less than a block away from school when she was taken. When the FBI brought in tracking dogs, they also confirmed this based on witness statements. Kathy was seen walking, happy-go-lucky, normal self, down this street, and then And then people suddenly just stopped seeing her walking. And so they brought in scent dogs to that street where she was seen, and it picked up her scent, and then it stopped, like just cold stopped, right by the street, and right where the witnesses said they last saw Kathy walking. And so they knew that at that point, a car probably pulled up and just snatched Kathy and drove off. But again, nobody saw that actually happen or heard it happen. A fellow classmate of Kathy's, her name was Beth, she said that on that day, she also, because basically it was normal for kids from the school to go home for lunch and then they would walk back to school, because it was like literally within a couple of blocks of all of their houses. And so she, who I guess was in a different class because she was there at a different time, as she's walking out of her house to walk back to school, she says she sees a car kind of just driving very slowly and creepily down the road, and a man was driving that car. But the friend wasn't like making a lot of like mental notes about it because they didn't know anything at the time. But it wasn't until after Kathy was taken where she goes, you know what, I saw a car. She gave the best description she could, and I believe they made this composite drawing of the individual, which these things are always absolutely horrifying. They made this and in hopes that someone may recognize them. They're not saying that this person was the kidnapper, but this person is just someone that was wanted for questioning, just to know if they saw anything. Now, along these streets, there were like crossing guards, and I guess they had these patrol kids that went to the school. They were older kids, and they would, I guess, patrol the streets. I'm not sure what their whole job was, but one of these patrol boys said a couple of months prior to this happening, when a man he had never seen before walked up to him and asked specifically for Kathy Shea. And at that time, Kathy was actually just down, like literally just down the street. Like the patrol boy could see her, and he kind of pointed at her and said, yeah, that's her right there. And then the man just got into a car and left. And he looked similar to the composite drawing of, the other person's witness statement. He was driving an older car. These kids back then weren't really great at describing like what kind of car or the, make or model or anything. But it was a similar description as to what Kathy's friend would later give after her abduction. And then as the FBI and police are questioning the neighborhood about Kathy, they get more statements about this mysterious man who had been seen in the area. And every description of the man was all very similar. And so that composite drawing pretty much, it sounds like people agreed on, like that's kind of what the man looked like. Again, is this man a kidnapper? Who knows? Why was this man asking for Kathy, a 6-year-old girl? Also very strange. And was that true? I mean, you have to just believe it was. You have to believe this patrol boy that was telling the truth. Other witnesses said they saw a younger guy, around 25 years old, driving around in this aqua-colored car on 14th Street, which was the streets that Kathy lived on. Now, this is a younger guy. The other guy was described as being more in his 50s and kind of just like an aging man. This other guy was young. One witness said that this man was sort of driving slowly down the street as well, and at one point he stopped to ask like these young kids who were walking to the school directions to someplace. And I guess he just gave off bad vibes to people who saw him. And so you have these two different men who are driving down the streets either the day of the kidnapping or around the time of the kidnapping, and police just want to know who they are. Again, they're not saying that these are the ones who kidnapped Kathy, but there's a strong chance one of them may have, because you better be safe than sorry. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into years. Kathy had never been found. There was this theory that floated around that, maybe somebody took Kathy who couldn't have kids of their own, and they just stole a young child to raise as their own. And so what they ended up doing was they put out flyers were distributed amongst all 50 states of like, hey, do you recognize this child? She may have been taken and then enrolled in maybe your school or lives in your neighborhood now all of a sudden. And it didn't lead to any information. No one ever came forward to state, oh my God, I've seen her. As every year goes by, the news runs Kathy's story, hoping it may jog somebody's memory about something they may have seen that day, but they just never get any information. Police also ruled out the parents pretty quickly. They were able to, just simply based on where they were when Kathy was taken, there was no way any of them were involved. This tight community of Tyrone, they wanted this to be a stranger who did it. They didn't want to think that one of their own friends or neighbors would have kidnapped this girl, but that was a possibility. It is certainly a possibility that Kathy may have run into someone she recognized or knew from this neighborhood, and maybe she trusted this person, and they were able to get her to calmly get into their car. And that's why nobody saw or heard any kind of altercation or screaming. Because if someone had just drove up to her and taken her, the odds are she would have screamed at least, and somebody may have heard it, but that never happened. So there is that possibility that it was somebody that she knew and trusted, and somebody that still lived in that neighborhood after the fact. They could have gone to barbecues after this kidnapping or, neighborhood parties and just mingled with the crowd. So it is certainly a thing that could have happened. FBI and police, they seem to think this was more of like a stranger abduction, just based on the fact that they were able to search most of the homes in the neighborhood and they questioned everybody and nobody really came up as being super suspicious. It's been 57, 58 years since Kathy Shea was stolen in broad daylight off the side of a road in a residential neighborhood. It's just so asinine to think that that's something that actually happened, but it did happen, and it does happen still. And it's just unbelievable that they've really gotten no solid information about who did this, why it happened, and more importantly, no information about where Kathy Shea is to this day. There is a chance that she could have been taken by someone who couldn't have children. The odds are slim, just because Kathy was 6 and she was able to, formulate her own thoughts and she could talk. And she may, this is a girl who would have said something like, oh my God, I was taken. It's like she would have said something, more than likely. Can't say that for 100% certainty, but more than likely. That's probably not what happened. And the odds are she was probably killed. I hope she wasn't. I hope she's out there somewhere alive. And if she is, there is a age progression photo of her, what she may look like today. Kathy would be in her 60s now, if still alive. And you'd have to think that because she was able to formulate her own thoughts and she could talk and all that, you have to think that as she grew up and got older, by the time she's an adult and whoever took her is probably dead, she would have said something as well. You would think so. But somebody somewhere out there has got to know the truth. And perhaps that somebody is you. If you have any information about who may have kidnapped and possibly murdered Kathy Shea on that day in March of 1965, please contact the Pennsylvania State Police at 610-696-6100. Both of Kathy's parents have since passed, and both of them passed never knowing what happened to their daughter. But Kathy does still have family out there. She also has the community out there, and everyone deserves to know what happened to her that day. So if you have information, please come forward. You do not have to report who you are. You just have to report what you know. Help Kathy's friends and family and the community get closure, get justice, and get Kathy home so they could lay her to rest. And maybe, possibly, her abductor may still be alive. And so maybe Kathy Shea can get the justice she rightfully deserves. But that is it for this case, True Crime Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. If you have stumbled across this page for the first time, hello, I'm Mike. I tell true crime stories. I tell 3 of them a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And what else? What else do I do? Oh, I sell merch. I'm also very much under the weather right now. Apologize. But I sell merch. We ship all over the world. The links to all of that is in the link tree in the description of this video below. And also, if you want to recommend a case, just email me. My email is listed below. Just email me the name of the person, where it happened, and when it happened. I'll add the name to my list. I'll cover it eventually. I just can't tell you when because I pick my cases at random, and there's like 5,400 names or so on that list, so it may be a while. I'm also a lot more known over on TikTok. I have about 3 million followers or so. So the link to that is in the description of this video in the link tree below. And I tell at least one true crime story there every single day. So feel free to follow over there if you like. But until the next case, which will be coming up on Monday, I shall see you all, true crimerertwo's. I'll see you all then. All right. Talk to you later. That was awkward. Okay.